Welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our special guest author is Father Leo Maasburg, and the book is Mother Teresa of Calcutta, a personal portrait, published by Ignatius Press. Thank you so much for stopping by here, Father. It's great to have you on our little book show. People would have seen you back on with Father Mitch several months ago when you were on the live show with him. And now you were here doing the live show, and you're here talking about Mother Teresa, a personal portrait, 50 inspiring stories never before told, because you actually are taping not one but two series for us here at EWTN, yes, right?
I do.
Now one's in German and one's in English, right? Now are they based on this book?
Yes.
Okay.
They're based on my experiences with Mother Teresa.
Well, let's ask you about this. I'm listening to your accent and I'm thinking, well, Mother Teresa, she spent a lot of time in India.
Correct.
You don't sound like you're from India.
Not really, no.
And, you know, I can't tell, where exactly are you from?
Well, I'm an Austrian, but I'm probably more a gypsy. Gypsy, meaning having no home.
Meaning going around, being nomadic.
Because I spent more than 25 years out of my country.
Right.
So far, and it's not yet ended.
Okay, let me ask you, I know in reading the book, there's some connection between you and Fatima. What's the connection?
There's a deep connection, because I served under Bishop Nilica, and he was a secretly ordained bishop in Eastern Europe.
What do you mean secretly ordained?
Secretly, he was ordained when he was 29 years old.
Okay.
And he was ordained in a cellar, because they were not allowed to have bishops. And Pius XII had given the Jesuits the order to maintain a secret hierarchy, so that they could have priests, ordained priests secretly, and so on. So they always ordained two bishops, one was working and the other one in hiding. And when the first one was discovered, the second one ordained another bishop. So, for example, Bishop Nilica ordained Bishop Koretz, who is today Cardinal Koretz, and so on. So they had a whole chain of bishops.
And this was under communism?
And this was under communism. And he left Czechoslovakia and came to Rome, and I was his secretary for many years. That's how I met Mother Teresa.
Well, you kind of mentioned, I think in the book, you kind of said when you first met her, you kind of took her as one of the many kind of church celebrities who passed by in Rome. What changed your mind?
What changed my mind? I believe her serious tenderness. She was serious with you. She was not just treating you as somebody who passed by. But when she talked to you, she concentrated fully, 100% on you. Maybe she talked 30 seconds, but that was an experience which you would remember for your whole life.
Well, I know what struck me, there's a story in the book, you talk about a photographer. You were, I think it was in India, and you were at one of her missions, and you were kind of going to step back and kind of keep an eye and see what's really going on here. And there was a story you tell about her and a photographer. Go.
The photographer was Raju Rai, an Hindu photographer, very, very sensitive man. And I was in the chapel, and she was praying in the chapel. And I was sort of glancing more at her than at Jesus. And at a certain moment I saw that somebody was coming in and sort of tried to approach her. And I thought, well, I would like to see how is she reacting. She was so deeply concentrated in prayer. And so he came closer and closer. At a certain moment she looked up and smiled at him with a radiant smile, as if she had expected him. It was the biggest pleasure for her to be disturbed in her prayer. Talked to him, and then bloop, fell back into full concentration at the prayer. So that was a very beautiful experience, and these things slowly changed my mind that maybe she was something serious.
Right, you said what moved me so much about this short scene was that Mother Teresa gave not even the slightest indication of displeasure or annoyance.
Right.
You said, only later did I understand that Jesus himself was so present for Mother Teresa in the people whom she met, that she, coming out of prayer and thus out of a lively conversation with Jesus, simply shifted from Jesus to Jesus.
Yeah.
Is that how you felt when you interacted with her?
Yes. Well, not that I felt like Jesus, but...
But that she treated you that way.
Yes, she treated me with full attention. And that's amazing with a person so busy. I mean, there was such a request. Everybody wanted to touch her, everybody, and we tried to keep people from... But as soon as she was addressing a person, he was fully there. It was like John Paul II. John Paul II had the same gift. The only problem that he had a bad ear. So when he wanted to listen to you, he had to do this, and you had the impression that he was looking at the next person.
I see, okay.
But that was not the case. He was fully concentrated on you.
Right, and I know in the book you talk about their relationship and their special relationship.
They
what
had a
was
very
it?
special relationship. Well, maybe the best is a story which relates to that. When Mother Teresa was brought to hospital with her heart attack, John Paul II was very concerned, and he called her. And she took the phone, and the Holy Father said, "Is this Mother Teresa?" And Mother Teresa answered, "Yes." "Is this the Holy Father?" "Yes." Then some silence. Then Mother Teresa says, "Holy Father, I love you." The Holy Father answered, "Mother Teresa, I love you too." And they put down the phone. That was a very special.
So that said it all, really,
Yeah.
for the two of them.
And another aspect was that when they met, Mother Teresa almost had some business. She didn't go just to see Holy Father watching, but she went because she wanted something from him, or needed something from him, or he had called her. But when they had dealt with their business, they stopped talking. They walked along in silence. That was very impressive. So when he accompanied Mother Teresa to the door, although they took a few minutes, they wouldn't say a word.
Now, as far as being an author, is this the first and only book you've written?
I hope so.
Okay, you hope so. Okay, so this was a trial and tribulation for you.
It was a bit of a difficulty, yes, because it came under pangs.
Pangs because you didn't think you were worthy to do it?
Well,
or?
first I didn't think of writing a book. Then my brother, who made books, he said, "You have to write this experience because otherwise you won't go to heaven." And and I said, "Okay, what do I need?" He said, "You give me 27 to 30 stories, and I do the rest." So I wrote the stories. Everything was ready. I put everything on the hard disk, backup copy, and put it in the drawer. That was May '94. The same night.
In 1994?
2004, sorry.
2004. So still you're talking about 8 or 9 years ago.
2004. The same night the burglars came and stole everything.
Oh my Lord.
Computer, backup, everything. So I had to restart again. I had some time in that period. So the next 3 months I rebuilt all the stories. And I told our technician in the office that please put that on the network so that it's safe. No? So he started the computer, switched off immediately, said, "There's a funny noise in the hard disk." Total hard disk crash, everything gone. And so I said, "Dear Mother Teresa, either you don't want it, or Our Lady doesn't want it, or the devil doesn't want it. Since I don't know who of these doesn't want it, I will not write it anymore until somebody comes and asks me to do it."
Okay.
And so I waited for 3 or 4 years. And then an interesting person came, the same person who does the U-Cut. I'm sure you know about the U-Cut,
right,
no?
Right, sure.
Bernard Msgr. And he came and he said, "Well, I've heard so many stories and always your name appears when the stories come. So wouldn't you like to write a book?" I said, "Well, then let's start."
So you start off, you actually wrote it in German, right?
I wrote it in German.
Now, not jumping ahead, but how many different languages is it in now? It's been out a couple of years. The English edition's out a little over a year. How many other editions are out now?
There are 16 editions are out, and 21 contracts have been signed.
And what's the most interesting or different language that it's been put into?
Well, the most interesting for me, I always wanted to reach China, and it came out in Taiwan Chinese and in Mandarin. So I've reached. For me, I'm happy. That's fine.
Okay. Now, when you were mentioning earlier about the number of stories your brother suggested. Now, this has 50 inspiring stories never before told. Was that because the new publisher said, "I need more stories," or there were just so many good ones you couldn't cut them down?
There were so many. And then I found out that I've got lots of stories. But I didn't write an academic book. I didn't write a biography. I didn't write a theological tractatus. I just wanted to show who Mother Teresa was in day-to-day life. How she reacted, what she did, her weaknesses, if she had any. And originally I wanted to write a book about her humor, because I thought that was the most striking aspect. She was deep inside humorous. And I believe that this is still the strongest characteristic. But she said, with our humor and with our joy, we catch souls. And I believe that's still true. And I would like to show that.
Now, in the preface, you said, "What would she want?" So it was very important to you that this would be a book that spoke about her the way she wanted to be seen, right?
Yes.
And that would mean that she wasn't number one. Who was?
Exactly, Jesus.
Jesus always was.
Because I remember when she asked me to give the first retreat, she surprised me because I wasn't ready, that she, from one day to the other, she said, Father, please give the sisters a retreat. I said, but what should I talk about? She said, well, Jesus.
Right. Start from there, right?
Exactly.
Right. You say here, on the numerous trips on which I was able to accompany Mother Teresa during her later years, I experienced something of the radiance and fascination of her personality. What do you mean, radiance?
Yeah. Radiance. First, she radiated normality. She radiated normality. She was a completely normal person. She was nothing extraordinary, so that you would, like a star or like nothing. She didn't have any airs. She didn't surround her with any airs. She was very concrete. She would pick up a piece of paper from the ground immediately if she saw it. She would look at you and say, Father, how are you today? No? Why you look so sad? Immediately, and she would hit it. She would understand that there's a problem. And she would immediately detect if you have been full of mosquito bites. She would say, oh, Father, what have you got? And this little attentiveness. And so she radiated a kind of atmosphere which I believe is idealistic women's atmosphere. She was a mother. She was a real mother.
That's a good point. Yeah, I was thinking in terms you would think of here's this spiritual person who's so in touch with God that they'd be out of touch with the world, but that wasn't the case at all, right?
Not at all.
Right. Now you say she was a forceful, shrewd, charismatic, and humble personality. That's an interesting package. Who did not try to dominate, but wanted to serve. Some people would ask about that. They'd say, well, clearly she's charismatic, but shrewd. Well, maybe she wasn't really. Can you be good and be shrewd?
Well, we thought, and we discussed a lot with my cousin who did the second translation. We said, is shrewd the right word? But it is the right word, because it says that she was not limited by human respects. She was limited by the love of God. She would never do anything which was not lovingly. But only because you wouldn't take Father Leo to the Holy Father without permission. For her was no reason. Why shouldn't he come with us? And she did. So we got through.
In fact, you told that story on Father Mitchell's show. I remember you telling that. Yeah. You said Mother Teresa usually declined stories about her life, saying, I don't really like to talk about myself because when people speak or write about me, then they write or speak less about Jesus.
Yes, that was her typical attitude. Everything she said, everything she did was to proclaim Jesus. Since she was 5 years old, she said, my only and deep love is the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Now, why did she remind you of your grandmother?
Because first of all, they were same generation, and she had wrinkles all over, and she had that very strong lip, where you could detect this is a very disciplined person towards herself. And that would also command some respect immediately. But at the same time, you would discover she was the sweetest person with everybody else. So very, very tough against herself, but very generous towards everybody else. And that was my grandmother. That was a bit of that elder generation. They never talked about themselves. They would never talk about their itches here, itching there, nothing. You don't talk about your trouble, and you don't talk about money.
Money. Now, it says here, we've arrived at an important feature of Mother Teresa's personality. After you talk about lingering in conversation with her Lord, that she would do this. She was herself what she demanded again and again of her sisters, namely, quote unquote, a contemplative in the world.
Yes, she was a walking cell, a walking monastic cell. Wherever she was, there was contemplation, there was meditation, and she contemplated constantly little details. So one day we passed in Czechoslovakia, we passed by a big crane. You know, these big cranes which pick up the cars like this. And it really looked a bit horrible. And she looked at it and said, Father, look, this looks like the devil. Once he gets hold of you, he never lets you go. I mean, this kind of constant meditation and contemplation of reality around her. I think the whole world for her was just a playhouse of God to show her certain things.
But you say also that pragmatic and very practical by nature, Mother Teresa had a knack for obtaining assistance and support for her work. Now, some people actually held that against her later on in her life.
Yeah. that's fine. What is good for the one is bad for the others. But she wouldn't have. She said, look, of course I will make many mistakes. She would admit mistakes immediately if she did. She would apologize. But she would pray, think, ask advice of everybody, and then she would decide and do.
And go forward.
So, yeah.
Now, we talked a little bit about John Paul II, and in chapter 3, How to Order a Saint, there's a scene where she, as soon as they had greeted each other warmly, Mother Teresa came to the point, Holy Father, we need a saint for our lepers. When the Pope asked whom Mother Teresa had in mind for the job, she mentioned Father Damien.
Father Damien, yes. And she got it. I mean, with trouble, it would take too long to tell the whole story, but it's a beautiful story because she went through it. But it was at the same time...
Because there was really, there was no mirror, the miracle hadn't happened yet and everything. So.
But she said, why? There's in the Bible, there's who gives his life for his brother, and he is the saint. No?
Right.
And then the cardinal said, but we have a tradition of 300 years. But isn't that a good occasion to change the tradition?
No.
The cardinal said, he was very shrewd. He said, but Mother Teresa, look, I know you're right, but don't you think it's easier if you ask our good Lord to give us these 3 miracles than we to change our tradition?
Well, he says here, the Holy Father already knew Mother Teresa far too well to get into a lengthy discussion with her. What do you mean?
Well, Mother Teresa went up to the Holy Father with a blank sheet with 4 points and said, Holy Father, I believe that we need this. This is the Corpus Christi movement. This is for secular priests because they are so lonely. Holy Father, please sign here. And he did. He signed. And that's how the Corpus Christi movement
you're tied into the Corpus Christi movement, right?
Because I'm a secular priest, and Corpus Christi movement tries to strengthen, to unite the secular priests.
Right. Now, in this book itself, and I know there's at least one. There's a lot of beautiful color pictures in here. Now, are those pictures that you had personally? I mean, there's some pictures of you in here. Are those your personal photographs?
Yes, they're all mine. I'm not a photographer, unfortunately, but I'm just a tourist, clicking.
But it gives you the feeling of really being there, because nothing looks staged. Everything looks like just the way it happened. True. And what about the cover? The picture on the cover?
The picture on the cover was taken in Armenia, and there were other people on the picture as well. So they'd been taken out. They walked away in the meantime, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Chapter 5, The Poor Are Wonderful People. In order to correctly understand the importance of Mother Teresa's charism or extraordinary spiritual gift, we need to bear in mind that her vocation was not directed toward the poor in general, but rather to, quote-unquote, the poorest or the poor, those who could not help themselves and had no one to take care of them. Why do you think that's an important distinction for you to make?
Because she herself made a distinction. I believe that she distinguished well between poverty and misery. Poverty, you can live in dignity. Misery, you can't live in dignity. So when you live in misery, you lose the respect, the human respect of yourself. And you lose, one could say, somehow the dignity of the child of God. And so when she took, for example, when she took the dying from the street to pick them up, the first thing she would do is to put a name of that person into her book. He had to have a name, not a number. Yeah. She wanted to give the person the dignity. And she repeated again and again a phrase which a dying person said. He said, Mother Teresa, I've lived like an animal in the gutter. Now I die, loved and cared for like an angel. Mm-hmm. And that was precisely what she wanted. She wanted to give them the dignity of children of God. She was not a hospital. And that was criticized very often. Why didn't she give them more medicines and so on? No, that was not her purpose. If you want medicines, take them to the hospital. Mm-hmm. Fine. If I can bring them to the hospital, of course I will. But if I don't have the means. That's how she experienced with the first dying person. She went to a hospital and they rejected them because she couldn't pay the bail, or how they call it.
Yeah, the amount of money to
so the
to
person
take care
died in her arms in front of the hospital.
Now, one of the things struck me here that I was unaware that, did Mother Teresa actually have a business card?
Yes, she did. She did. I believe I have one with me. Yes, I always carry this. We rebuild it, but this is even the typewriter, the same. So that was her business card.
The fruit of silence is prayer, the fruit of prayer is faith, the fruit of faith is love, the fruit of love is service, the fruit of service is peace. Mother Teresa.
And the other side,
business card.
God bless you, Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa.
So this is for you.
And that's what, thank you, and that's what she would hand out then.
She would hand out because that's her business. It was,
Right.
but she learned it from a businessman who said, "Look, Mother Teresa, this is me. This is all my business." She said,
Oh.
"We need that.
I
too.
need to have
We
one of
need
those,
exactly."
right? Kind of like Mother
And then,
Angelica with
yeah.
the TV station. Oh, I need one of these. It was interesting too. On page 48, you talk about a visit to Japan. I heard went quite differently from Mother Teresa. She traveled on a high-speed train from Tokyo to Osaka. In stark contrast to Calcutta, everything in Japan functioned flawlessly. It's wonderful, said Mother Teresa. The train arrived on time and the seats are very comfortable. But then she seemed somewhat disappointed after all and added, "But I am sorry for the Japanese. It seems they cannot arrive late, not even by a second." And that's where you start thinking about some of the things she said about the more first world countries that are supposed to be so well off, and like the United States and Europe, etc., that we have our own problems, right?
Well, she called it, I don't know the word she herself called it, but it was in her mind that there was the second stage of poverty. Yes, she said, there's a much deeper poverty, that's the social poverty, loneliness, not being wanted, not being necessary, a throwaway of society, she called it. And so she said it's much more difficult to eliminate that poverty.
Now you said Mother Teresa was a missionary through and through who saw God's omnipotence and the love of Jesus at work in everything and everyone. At the same time, however, she was also a seeker. What was she seeking?
She was a seeker of the depth of God. She didn't stop at the surface. She wanted to enter the thought, the mind, the understanding, the depth of God. And maybe that was fulfilled in the dark night of the soul, when she started not understanding anything anymore, because our mind cannot understand God. So she was, in this sense, she was a seeker. She wanted to go to the depth of things, everything which was necessary. She was not an academic thinker, because I asked her once, Mother Teresa, why is Africa not developing? And she said, Father, we don't think about these things. We go and see the need, and if we can help, we help. So she was very practical, but she would ask, what medicines do you have got here on the spot? And then she would, why this and why not that, and so on. She would really penetrate in that.
Right, in chapter 8, do little things with great love. You say Mother Teresa handed on every gift she received as quickly as possible. Everything always belonged to the poor. And went on to say, on the next page, it doesn't matter how much we give, it matters how much love we put in the giving.
Right.
That's tough.
Is
it? That really? Yeah, well, because sometimes it's easy to give, but sometimes we do it reluctantly.
I felt it would take the burden of we have to do great things. No, we don't have to do great things. We have to do whatever we do with great love. And if this is cleaning the toilet, she would do it with great love. So it relieves you. It makes you free.
Right. What is an armor-cracking incident?
An armor-cracking incident?
You say, I witnessed a rather scary armor-cracking incident with Mother Teresa in Nicaragua.
Oh, wow. Well, but that's a long story. That's a long story. Maybe you could read that story.
Okay, we'll pass over that one.
But it was really frightening, because Nicaragua at that moment was practically in war, and she wanted to meet the president. So it was a pretty dangerous situation. It was a very dangerous situation. She wanted to meet the president, and so the president came up and he sat on a chair like you, but we were sitting lower, on a lower level, and then he was preaching against the Americans and all the bad people and the devil and so on for 20 minutes. And beside him 2 gunmen with machine guns. And there Mother Teresa, one sister, and me shaking at least. And at a certain moment there was silence. Probably the president thought he had preached enough. There was a very tough silence. Suddenly Mother Teresa got up and stood up and looked sort of over the edge here, looked and said, do you have children? He said, yes. Put out the hand, miraculous medal, 1. How many? 7. 7, one by one. Do you have a wife? Another 1. And for yourself, you put here, like around, he explained to him how to wear the miraculous medal. And then she said, I brought you a gift. I want to give you 4 of my sisters for your poorest of the poor in Managua. And he accepted it.
He accepted it because of that.
That was the first foundation in Nicaragua.
Anybody. On page 62, I really want to know this. Do you still have in your possession an oversized slab of chocolate from 1989, and if so, where is it?
I do have. I do.
Is it refrigerated at least, or what?
No, I'm sure it's powder by now, but I haven't opened it. And on top it says, "God bless you, Mother Teresa," because she sent it into Armenia from Calcutta, remembering that there was a priest whom she should console or show her closeness. And so she sent me that chocolate, which I never ate because it was just carrying the love of Mother Teresa.
Well, there's a story in here on chapter 10, Contemplatives in the World. A young priest had just prayed the liturgy, the hours, and the rosary with Mother Teresa and her traveling companions. They had scarcely finished when he spontaneously asked, "Mother Teresa, what is your secret?" She looked at him with a quizzical twinkle in her eye and replied, "That's very simple, I pray."
Okay. Right.
Is it because it's so simple that it confounds us in a sense?
Well, he said to Father Comastri, who is now Cardinal Comastri in the Vatican, he said, "Father, how much do you pray?" And he said, "Well, I pray my breviary." And I see. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Why do you ask me?" You see, Father, we are so poor. If we don't pray, we don't have to give anything.
I see.
So that was it.
And what she says also was the idea when asked about prayer was for her, she said, "God speaks to me and I speak to him." It's that simple, right?
That's simple.
Now, just before we go, because we're out of time, at the very end, there's a little handwritten note. And so it says below, "Dear Father Leo, be holy like Jesus, be only all for Jesus through Mary, give only Jesus to all you meet. God bless you, Mother Teresa." Is that one of your most valuable possessions?
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you said you're not going to write another book, so let me just ask you before we go, what is your hope for this book?
I hope that people discover that for our time, the sanctity, the simple, normal sanctity Mother Teresa lived is the solution to all of our problems. She was sent by God to show us in our times what He wanted for us.
Right.
He wanted humility, He wanted simplicity, He wanted poverty from each one of us. Blessed the poor in spirit. And she lived it, and she lived it in such an attractive way. She would never have said, "Do the same." She said, "What I do, you cannot do. What you do, I cannot do. But together, we can do something beautiful for God."
Right. Everybody has their own mission in a sense,
Exactly.
and you have to find your way. Well,
but
thank
that
you
mission is following Jesus.
Right. But at least we know what your mission is, and we appreciate it for you spreading the word about Mother Teresa and making this book available, giving us some personal insights into her life.
Thank
God
you very
bless you.
much.
Keep up the great work, and
Thank you.
Good luck with your series here on EWTN. Speaking here with Father Leo Maasburg, author of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, a personal portrait, 50 inspiring stories never before told. This is a must-read. Check it out. Published through Ignatius Press, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. I'm Doug Keck. Join us next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark.